Welcome back to the Writing and the Disciplines podcast. This week we're going to be talking about writing for geology. First off, I want to talk about how geological writing lines up with general scientific writing in general. So first, it's all about precision, about being as precise as possible in the facts that you present. The cornerstones of scientific writing are accuracy, credibility, and comprehensiveness. You want your research and your writing to build upon existing research and knowledge, but you also want it to have something new to say, something original that it adds to the conversation. Scientific writing is always going to be heavily laden with data, so you want to make sure that you use this data to make a point. Don't just include graphs and tables for the sake of including graphs and tables. So here's a depiction from a movie, Ocean's 13, where Brad Pitt pretends to be a geologist in order to sneak a piece of surveillance equipment into Al Pacino's office. As you can see, the way Brad Pitt is depicting the stereotype of geologist, very unkempt, big facial hair, glasses. He's got some sort of pocketed vest and, rough and tumbled shirt. Looks like he just came out of the middle of a dusty field doing field work. And if you had seen the scene from the movie, you actually would have seen his portrayal of a geologist as someone who doesn't have a lot of social skills and isn't very polished in dealing with high-powered individuals. This isn't very far off because in geology at some point you're going to have to go out into the field and do field work. This leads us to our first genre of writing in geology, the field notebook, field notes. So at some point you're going to have to go into the field. This is the exciting part about geological writing, but it's also the meticulous part because you have to record everything you observed. Because this is geared towards publication, leading up to the second genre, the scientific paper, your field notes need to be neat, accurate, and complete. So here are some pictures of some students out in the field doing field work. And as you can see, they're dressed for the field. They're wearing comfortable clothing, durable clothing. Another thing I want you to notice, they're all working in pairs. One student taking the samples, measurements, what have you. Another person diligently recording the information the other student is gathering in a field notebook. It's important that we work in pairs because we don't want the research to be tainted by the human error of one individual on a team. So your field notebook should be something durable that will withstand the elements. You should also have some sort of durable method of writing, a pencil or a pen with waterproof ink. For each entry, you should include context information such as the date, the grid reference on an aerial photograph of a map where you're working, and other methods. It should be free of any personal writings, so no doodles, no daydreams, no characters, no sketches, no BS. So when you're writing the field notes, constantly ask yourself what information is going to be relevant to the point that you're trying to make in the paper that this will lead to. Keep your observation at this point separate from interpretation. That comes later in the scientific paper. Record as much information as possible. This goes back to the heading for each entry in the field journal. Who's participating? What tools are you using? What methods are you using to collect data? What's the weather like? The more information you include, the more credible your research and your field notes are going to be. When you've completed your field work, make sure that you include a title page in the table of contents that will make your field journal more easily accessible to the reader. Finally, make copies. Always back up your writing. No matter what discipline you're writing in, always make sure that you make backups. You don't want an entire month's worth of field work to, go down the drain just because one member of your team forgot and left the field journal at the site. So here are two examples of field notes from a field journal. The top you can see has clear title information, who was involved in the project, where it was, the grid reference to an aerial photo. It also gives you the date, and then a little note about what was found. The bottom one is a sketch of a hillside that shows you the stratification of different minerals within a hillside. It also gives you sort of a reference on a compass view from northwest to southeast, but it also gives you a scale. So that way the reader knows how big this is in reference to that grid reference and that aerial photo. So the three main components of your field notes will be numerical values, which you want to write big and you don't want to erase but cross through to prevent any misunderstanding. Sketches that need to include a scale, so that way your reader knows how large this is in reality, and it needs to be large and as large and open as possible, so that way your reader can see the detail and the nuance of your drawing and understand its importance or its relationship to the research you're doing. Also, finally, explanatory notes. And these clarify what's not evident from the research, the data that you're putting forth in your field notes. This is also a place for you to record your thoughts, your hypotheses, any ideas that contradict your original hypotheses, and your revised hypotheses. Then we get to the second genre of geological writing I want to talk about, and that is the scientific report. So this is an analysis of previously completed research, whether it's your own or somebody else's. This is where you present some interpretation of that previously done research, and you want to do it in a way as if your reader knows nothing about geology. So remember before in your field notes I said separate observation from interpretation. This is where you will do the interpretation of the data you recorded in your field notes. It has to be logically organized, and your research also has to present or this paper has to present a thorough analysis of that logically organized research. So you have to make some sense of the data that you're presenting to your reader. You also want to be concise. You don't want to overload the reader with a lot of geological jargon that's going to discourage them or overwhelm them with terms that they don't understand. Also, you want to be as credible as possible, citing your own thorough and comprehensive research and the research of others in the field that you've done and found beforehand. So, geological writing and scientific writing in general uses APA format versus MLA format that you might be familiar with from your first year composition classes. So in APA format, there is a very prescriptive organization. So you have the title page that gives the department and collegiate affiliation. Then you have the abstract, which gives an executive summary of what's being discussed in the body of the paper. Then you have the introduction, and that's where you have your statement of purpose. What is the point that you're trying to get across? What is it that you're trying to prove through presenting this specific corpus of research? Then in the body, that's where you present the evidence that supports your main conclusion that you're trying to draw, the point you're trying to make. Then the conclusion, that's where you present the findings that you arrived at, the interpretations that you made about the research that you did and considered. Then finally, you have your reference page, where you reference all of the works that you have cited in the paper. Tables and figures are something that's going to be essential to scientific writing. So each table and figure should have its own caption that fully explains what information is being displayed in the figure and table. It needs to have a descriptive title that tells you exactly what the nature of the experiment or the research being done, lets you know exactly, what was being investigated and how it was being investigated. And then it must be referenced in the paper. You don't want to include graphs, tables, charts, figures unless you discuss them in the text of the paper. Otherwise, they're just pictures to distract your reader's attention away from what you're trying to say. Then finally, if there's enough research to warrant a table of contents, also include a list of tables and figures that you've used throughout the paper. So here we get an example of a table. As you can see, it has a descriptive title. It gives you the information in a well-organized way. It has a note that gives you some information on the method of testing, and then it gives you a note that gives you some contextual information about the test as it was done. So MLA versus APA. So in-text citations, with MLA you use the last name of the author and then the page number. With APA you use the last name of the author, the year of publication. Then you paraphrase or you summarize, and then you give the page number from where that paraphrase or summary came from. So In APA, you're going to focus more on doing paraphrasing and summarizing than direct quotes because APA champions looking at the research discussed rather than the individual language of the author. So in APA, you're going to be using more paraphrases and summaries rather than direct quotes. And this is, like I said before, because APA focuses on the ideas and concepts that are being presented rather than the individual wording of some author's text. So finally, geological writing, it should be precise, it should be factual. You always want to know what you're talking about. Never be caught shortchanged. Never be caught underinformed. Always have done your research before you start speaking on a subject. Be thorough. Leave no stone unturned. Make sure that you consider every perspective and every angle. And finally, be clear. Make sure that whatever you're writing, whatever research you're doing, is comprehensible and accessible to the reader outside the discipline. All right, I hope this has been helpful, and I will see you next time.